Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in good spirits wherever you are in the world. As always, my friends, as always. And I would like to thank all of you very much who have submitted questions for me to answer in a kind of Q&A session, I suppose. I've never done anything like this before on this channel. I have answered questions from viewers and friends on this channel before, but never in a kind of accumulated set of questions in a Q&A format. And so I want to thank, in particular, SJS Films for letting me borrow his idea. So thank you very much, my friend. And so with that, I will try to go through as many of the questions as possible. I have the comment section open on my computer screen right now, and I'm scrolled down at the very bottom here. And so I'll just go through them as many as I can. And if there's a question that for whatever reason I can't answer, please, I ask for your understanding and forgiveness, but I hope you can understand. But I will certainly do my best with all of these questions. So with that, let us begin in earnest. So the first set of questions I received is from AziaXtremeNFinity. So thank you very much for those questions. And the first question you ask is, have you ever heard of a YouTube movie reviewer named Oliver Harper? And the answer is yes, I have. I'm a big fan of Oliver Harper's channel. I have been for a number of years. And also, I particularly like what he does with Duncan Casey and the James Bond films. There's one commentary track, for example, that the two of them did for the film The Living Daylights, and I really love that one. There's a particular way that Duncan Casey has his own Timothy Dalton impersonation, and the way that he says he's not the Superman. I think it's really great. I can't do it justice. Duncan Casey has a great Timothy Dalton, as well as other impersonations. So yes, I'm a big fan of Oliver Harper's channel. Number two, what would you consider to be the golden age of Hollywood or cinema in general? And this is, I think, a question that I can't answer with one answer, but I would say, if we're talking about Hollywood, I would say 40s and 50s Hollywood cinema, and then also the late 60s and 70s Hollywood cinema, corresponding with the film school generation and sort of a new independent spirit of cinema in Hollywood anyway. Number three, have you ever bought used DVDs and Blu-rays? The answer is yes, I have. Number four, what would be your favorite film genre? Again, I can't give you only one because I like many, but I am a fan of sci-fi, action, horror. I'm also a fan of drama, romantic comedies, and comedies in general. And even the subgenres in those particular genres I'm also a big fan of. Between Criterion Collection, Shout, Scream Factory, and Arrow Video, which company do you like the most? It's probably Criterion, although I do have a great fondness for Shout Factory and Arrow, and also Masters of Cinema, Eureka as well as other labels. 88 Films in particular I'm really fond of, and other labels, Second Run or in Japan too, there are other great labels as well. So, but I've always been a fan of Criterion. I think I've known Criterion the longest, let me put it that way. And so I think there is that advantage that Criterion has vis-a-vis my own consumption of private home media. And then number six, are there any movies you would like to see get special edition DVD Blu-rays? The answer to that is yes. And perhaps, for example, we spoke about it recently on this channel. Once Upon a Time in the West, a Sergio Leone film, that is screaming for a special super deluxe version to be released one day, if at all were possible. As you know, there are many versions of that film, there are many cuts, etc. And so it would be great to have as many cuts in one deluxe package as possible, plus some documentaries, maybe an explanation as to the difference in terms of the various cuts and how that affects one's viewing of the film, etc., and a history behind the releases in the various territories in the world, in particular Europe, Italy, the United States, the UK, etc., and Japan maybe too, as well as other places. But yeah, that's an example of a title that I'd love to see get really super duper deluxe Blu-ray treatment one of these days. Thank you very much for your questions. Next is our dear friend Eric at Asian Movie Enthusiast, which is a great channel. And he asks, what is your favorite Shinya Tsukamoto film? And that's a very good question. His filmography is it's quite unique in many respects, as you know, my dear friend. But I think probably it would have to be Tetsuo, the Iron Man. I think that's the one that really I saw it when I was a kid too, growing up, and I was never the same. And so it was a really eye-opener of a film. Very grungy, earthy, almost experimental work that is just a wild ride. It goes all over the place, and it's just filled to the brim with ideas and then some. And so, yeah, that's probably the one for me. Let's see. Next is Paynraven, who has a number of questions here, so thank you very much. You ask, the first of your questions being, what are your thoughts on Mystery Science Theater 3000? And I love Mystery Science Theater 3000. I was living in the States around the late 90s or so, or the early to late 90s. And it was around that time, I think, that Mystery Science Theater 3000 was broadcast on basic cable. And so I would watch that occasionally, and I always found it to be a lot of fun. Number two, what is the worst movie you have seen in the Criterion Collection and on other platforms? I would probably say, I wouldn't call it the worst film, but maybe films that I find difficult to engage with. Let me put it that way. Probably, let's say, in terms of films that are on the Criterion Collection, again, films that I find personally difficult to engage with because of my own personal background or my own character makeup or whatever, or my own mood at the time. I don't know, maybe films like maybe The Mikado or something like that, or maybe if it's Dario Argento, or a film that's not in the Criterion Collection, Dario Argento's film Giallo. But I always feel a little bit bad answering those questions because I always want to acknowledge that I know that there are people who do enjoy those films, and so I always want to say that if I do feel that way about a film, that doesn't mean that I have anything against anyone who feels very positively or really gets into those films. And as I say, the fact that I don't engage with a film has a lot to do, and that says a lot about me, I think, more than anything else. But there's that. And also, maybe another film that I have trouble engaging with that's not in Criterion, maybe is a film like Breakfast at Tiffany's, I think. Number three, how do you find time to watch long movies like Berlin Alexanderplatz, etc.? And I think it's just a matter of setting aside some time, usually on the weekend, usually late at night when my family is asleep, because it's hard to watch, or it's impossible for me to watch sort of intense or violent films during the day because I still have kids. I have 2 children, and so I don't want to watch anything that is unsuitable for little children at their age, and I don't want to do that. And so I will be very careful not to watch anything that is a sort of intense drama even until everyone is asleep. So that usually means I have to stay up late at night, and then I'll have the early morning hours to watch a film. And usually if it's a long film, I'll usually spend that time like that. It can't be every night that I can watch a film like that, of course, but I'll usually try to do that. And I always try to do it in one sitting. But sometimes it's impossible, I know, but I always try to do it in one sitting. But for something like that is episodic, like for instance Berlin Alexanderplatz, of course I'll sort of set aside time for the episode or not the entire work itself, but maybe the episode. And sometimes that's also a great way to engage with those longer works. Next, the next question you ask is, what is the most disturbing movie ever in Criterion and other platforms that you own? I guess the one that comes to mind to me, and maybe one that comes to mind for a lot of other people, maybe something like Salo, although I do think it's a much more complicated film, and it's one that really is it's not just disturbing. I think there's so many more things that are going on in the film besides its disturbing aspects. And I did actually talk about that film in a video that I posted a number of years ago on this channel, and even now it's a video that gets it's one of the highest viewed videos that I've ever posted on this particular channel, a video that I did on the Criterion release of Salo. But if you're interested, you can please check that out if you haven't already. And then number 5, when do you see yourself on where do you see yourself on YouTube in 5 years? Oh gosh, I don't know. Hopefully I'll keep doing this that long, and if I am, then I guess it's just doing the same thing that I've been trying to do for the past couple years right now, which is just try to talk about the films that I really think I feel like I want to talk about, and also talk about Criterion releases and things of that nature. Again, it really depends also on the nature of the Blu-ray industry and the DVD industry and home media entertainment, etc. What will happen in 5 years, who can say? But that will have a lot to do with it. But even so, I don't, as some of you may know, I don't necessarily buy all the new stuff, and I don't have these grand collections in terms of new stuff and new acquisitions. I leave that to other YouTubers who do a much better job of doing that than I. But even in 5 years, even heaven forbid the Blu-ray industry were to collapse, then still there would be a lot to be able to talk about in terms of the currently existing physical media releases from the great labels that we know and others. So yes, hopefully in 5 years it'll still be more of the same. But anyway, thank you very much for your question. Let's see here. Next is from galaxytides, our dear friend galaxytides. So the first question that you have is, how would you go about trying to get friends, family into films beyond the giant blockbusters? This would be auteur cinema, indie films, international films, etc. And I suppose the answer to that is, it really depends on the person. There isn't necessarily, I always try to be as sensitive as possible. And I don't necessarily, I always try to say to someone who likes blockbuster films, first of all, there's nothing inherently wrong with liking blockbuster films. There's nothing inherently wrong with liking those summer popcorn movies. I think those are great, and I grew up on those when I was a kid. And I would say also that there's nothing inherently wrong with liking only art house cinema, etc. I think so, but those worlds oftentimes find little crossover, or if they do, there sometimes is somewhat of a tension, which I don't think is really. I don't think it's necessary. I think those two worlds can coexist quite peacefully. And so, if someone were to come up to me and ask me for a recommendation in, let's say, an art house cinema field, then I would go about making a suggestion in that way. So in other words, I would always wait until someone asked me proactively, and I wouldn't necessarily want to try to impose my own view on anyone. I do YouTube videos and such, but you as viewers, as you know, you can always turn off a YouTube video. You can always leave a thumbs down on the video. You can always express disagreement with the video in a comment, etc. So I always encourage that sort of thing. And the point is that I don't think that I don't see my YouTube videos as necessarily trying to impose my will and my view on anyone who's watching, because I don't believe in that. But if anyone is sincerely asking me for recommendation into a particular corner of cinema that they are not well versed in, then, and if I have some ideas, then I will try to help that particular person with some suggestions that I might have. And I've been very fortunate in that a number of people have asked me of my own particular recommendations here and there. So there's that. And if there's a situation where I think the moment is right for me to just very gently make a suggestion about what about this sort of film or that sort of film, then I'll certainly try to make the suggestion and then go from there. But I will never, I always try to make a point not to try to impose myself too much. Maybe I think I've done that in the past, and maybe I still do. And so if that's the case, I always try to withdraw, because as I say, I don't think it's necessarily the case that one form of cinema loving is better or worse than another form of cinema loving. But if someone in this group wants to have more film experience, let's say in another group, or vice versa, then of course, then I'd be happy to try to talk or have suggestions to the extent that I have the knowledge. And that's not to say that I will have the knowledge about that all the time, because I don't and I won't. So yeah, so that's I try to sort of be as let's say as sensitive as I can, and still try to respect the tastes and viewpoints of those people who might like just one certain block of cinema instead of others. And as I say, cinema is so vast and wide that there's nothing necessarily inherently wrong with liking just one particular block of cinema. And I refer to that as being summer movie block, popcorn entertainment, or the art house vein, as it were, that avenue. I know people who like only this group and not this group, and I know people who like only this group and not this group, and there are many other groups in that as well. And so I have to respect that, and I can't necessarily say, oh, you have to watch this, that. I can say what I like, which is a completely different question, but anyway, I hope I was able to answer that. Number 2, what are your favorite Studio Ghibli films? Oh, this is great. I was just talking about Studio Ghibli with our dear friend Luke at Razor Wire Reviews, and we were talking about one of my favorites, or it could be my favorite, which is Only Yesterday, Omoide Poro Poro. So I like Only Yesterday. I also really, really love Kiki's Delivery Service. And yeah, probably those two, Kiki's Delivery Service and Only Yesterday. My daughter really likes Spirited Away and Ponyo. She's 8 now, and so she really likes those. And number 3, if you had the ability to go back in time and experience the creation of one of your favorite films in real time, which ones would you pick? That is really a fascinating question. That is really fascinating. Probably one whose production history is it's very complicated. So perhaps something like, oh gosh, I don't know, maybe The Magnificent Ambersons, the Orson Welles film. I would love to have seen all that, or even Citizen Kane. It would have been great to see all those shots, how those were constructed, or maybe a more quote-unquote modern example, maybe John Carpenter's The Thing, perhaps. I'd love to see that. Or I've loved to have been on the set when they were shooting some of those wonderful camera movements, say Tenebrae or Deep Red, for example. But again, those might be just some examples. I'm sure there are many more, but there's that. So. Oh gosh, and maybe I would have been on the set. I would love to have go back in time, experience the creation of other great films. Oh gosh, there's so many to mention, I suppose. But I hope those examples are satisfactory in terms of a response to your question, my friend. So thank you. Next is from MultiMediaAssassin. And you have a number here, so let's try to go through those as thoroughly as possible. So first is, are you from Japan or are you Japanese American? So yes, I am born in Japan, so I am Japanese. I am not Japanese American. And so I wasn't born in the United States, and so I have no citizenship rights under U.S. law or under U.S. immigration law. So I have no connection in terms of citizenship rights with the United States or any other country other than Japan, because I was born here. But I did spend a great number of years growing up in the United States and in the United Kingdom, and I did receive my, for instance, my education up to college was in places other than Japan, and so. But I am Japanese, 100% Japanese in terms of my citizenship. So I hope that. I know I get questions like that sometimes, but and I don't mind those questions at all. Who would be some of your favorite YouTube movie reviewers? There are quite a number. I know Oliver Harper was mentioned. I really love Oliver Harper's channel. Also, I'm a big fan of Kermode and Mayo, Mark Kermode and Simon Mayo. I really love that rapport that they have. I'm a big fan of Mark Kermode. I really admire his work. That's not to say I agree with everything that he says, but even where I disagree, as I say, disagreement in cinema is very healthy, and so it's great to feel a sense of disagreement as well as agreement. So I really admire all that he's done for us in terms of the film critics and the work that they have done to help people like me better appreciate and understand cinema. And also, I'm a big fan, a really big fan of a number of online movie critics. But if I could name a couple others, I would also name, I'm a really, really big fan of Alonso Duralde. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a pretty big online film critic, and he has been for a number of years. And he has an online or YouTube film critic podcast with Christy Lemire and Matt Atchity, and sometimes also Ben Mankiewicz, and it's really great. And so I'm a big fan of that group, and it's usually the core being, I think, in particular Matt Atchity and Christy Lemire, but their rapport I think is wonderful, and I'm a big fan of Alonso Duralde. And the reason why is there was a great documentary that was made about the film Valley of the Dolls, and it was a film that eventually also received a Criterion release. But there's a great documentary about Valley of the Dolls, and it's about the making of the film, and also about these contemporary critics who are really showing their admiration of Valley of the Dolls. And one of those critics was Alonso Duralde, and I loved how all the critics were describing certain pretty key camp moments of the film, but the way that Alonso Duralde describes some of those campy moments in the film, I think, is so suggestive of how well he has a command over the English language, and his descriptions and the way that he uses language is so wonderful. So I'm a big fan of Alonso Duralde. So let's see. Next, do you watch any movies on Netflix, Hulu, Prime Video, or any other streaming services? So I used to have a trial subscription to Netflix, but I don't anymore. And I did that in order to be able to watch a number of Netflix films. And so I was able to do so around the end of last year, I think, or the beginning of this year. But I don't have Netflix anymore at the moment. And I don't have Hulu. I do have Amazon Prime Video. And also there's the Disney streaming service here in Japan, which is called Disney Theater. And so, but Prime Video and Disney Theater are more or less used by my family. And so I rarely watch anything on Prime Video, although I really should try to take more advantage of that. But Disney Theater is one that my family uses quite a lot, and so it's good also because you can also watch these programs with optional English language tracks, and so that's really good, especially because here in my family is really trying to give our children an English language upbringing as well. So we want to try to give them as many avenues for English language exposure as possible. And one of those ways is to be able to watch children's programming or animation in English. And I think the Disney Theater app is really helpful for that, as well as providing some interesting entertainment as well. Let's see. Do you think Criterion should add TV shows to their library? And if so, which ones would you want to see them distribute? So Criterion actually has released a number of TV shows already in some releases. For instance, there's the Golden Age of Television release, which is, I think, around the spine. It's around. There's a great big DVD release of that. Also, in the Laserdisc days, they did release some Laserdiscs of I Love Lucy and the Addams Family, which is an interesting bit of trivia for anyone who is interested in the Laserdiscs as well. And there are other examples like that. But I think I understand the gist of your question. And so, yes, of course, I think there's great room for TV shows and exploring those in a way that we might see Criterion treat other works of art like cinema. And so, yeah, I would think that would be great. I'm not so big on TV shows in that I don't necessarily know all the modern recent TV shows, because I don't necessarily watch a lot of TV shows, unfortunately. And so I don't, I think, I can mention a few, but it would just kind of be more embarrassing to show my lack of expertise in TV shows, I suppose. But I don't watch a lot of these TV shows that are pretty talked about a lot in sort of YouTube film and TV show critic circles, especially in North America and the United Kingdom. But I do watch Japanese TV, and not a lot, but my share. And also, if we're talking about TV shows that are, the big one for me is the one that I think we all have in common, let me put it that way, is probably Twin Peaks. But that would be great to say. And so actually we do have a bit of a Twin Peaks connection with the Criterion Collection already. And so I don't think it would be totally out of the ballpark of imagination to see more Twin Peaks in the Criterion Collection, as an example. Next, would you like to see any of the classic Disney films or other animated movies added to Criterion? Sure, I think that would be great. Whether it would be possible or not is another question entirely. But of course, I'm totally open to that. And any kind of animated movies or short films or any forms of animation, of course, the more the merrier, in my opinion. Are there any other intellectual properties such as books, comics, video games, etc. you think should be adapted into films? Oh gosh, this is a pretty difficult question for me. I don't quite know. Some of the works of literature that I read, for example, I think really work so well on their own, and so I wouldn't necessarily want to see them adapted necessarily. I suppose if I could come up with an example, maybe it would be great to see, and I know that there might be something in the works, who knows, but it would be great to see a kind of another adaptation of the Akira manga, the Akira manga. I love the film. I love the film to bits, very much so, and I love how it's actually different than the manga. But it would be so interesting to see the manga alive in cinema form or TV series form. And again, fingers crossed for anyone who knows any recent news about what might be happening with the Akira storyline in the works. But anyway, that might be an idea that could happen. So anyway, I hope that that answers your questions, and thank you very much for sending them to me. That's really kind of you. Next is Alan Nigrello, our dear friend Alan. Thank you so much. If you were only able to watch one genre of film for the rest of your life, horror, sci-fi, drama, comedy, thriller, etc., and then within that genre, what would your top 10 films be? Oh gosh, this is, I don't know. I can't give you a top 10. I really have to think about that, and it would be, I think I'd need days and days and days or weeks to be able to come up with a top 10. So I'll forgo the top 10 films part of the question, if you don't mind, just because of time. But if I had to pick one genre, I think it would probably be a genre that I could watch with my kids. I love all the other genres, don't get me wrong. But I love horror and sci-fi in particular. But probably I would have to omit those genres simply because they wouldn't necessarily be films that I could see with my kids, at least at their age right now, as much as I love those genres, of course. So maybe it might be drama or comedy. one of those, maybe drama or comedy, or maybe something that, or maybe drama or comedy or sci-fi, or that is age appropriate. Let me put it that way. So I think that would be the one that I could watch. Again, if I had to pick one genre, I think I would pick the one genre that I could watch with my family. But great question, and I'm sorry I couldn't answer the top 10 one, but maybe in another video, or maybe let's talk, you and I, and we can of course exchange ideas. It's so great to know you, my dear friend, by the way. So thank you so much. And then Zachary U. Geesaman, so I apologize if my pronunciation is off, but thank you very much for your questions here, and you gave me a couple, which is, number one, if you were to write and direct your own feature-length film on an unlimited budget, what would it be about and who would star in it? Don't feel obligated to go into great detail if you don't want to. Let me just step back and say I did have ambitions when I was very, very young, maybe in high school. I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I actually dabbled in stop motion animation and a lot of these things, hand-drawn animation, not very good, very, very crude stuff. I mean, I'd take a little car and I had a short film that I made about a toy car that was driving around my house. And it was something I did for school, and I had these two cars that I animated all over the house, and I set the whole animated chase to the music of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, the theme song to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and it was all I did the zooms and camera movements, etc., and it was pretty crude. It was just me and a pretty bulky video camcorder. So, but I did have ambitions to do that. And when I was in college, I didn't take any formal training, but I do like pieces of paper on a table, and I just drew one line at a time, or that sort of thing, and so create these sort of what I called a flash images. I mean, it was a pretty flimsy attempt at trying to do animation. It didn't really do. I didn't really find much success with that artistically, anyway. And but I did also try to do some short films on video. So I should actually say short videos. And I did try to dabble in 16 millimeter a little bit, but it didn't work out in the end. There was a particular project that I was trying to do in college that was a pretty. It was one of those things where it was a love story that I shot on video, and it was just I had two friends of mine act in it, and it was just a love story. A boy and a girl meet on a college campus, and they have a date and they fall in love. And that was it. But it was all shot in reverse. So it was that concept of David Lynch and Twin Peaks. And that sort of thing. So it was all shot in reverse. So they're walking backwards, and then we shot it, and then we replayed it in reverse. So they're looking like they're walking in forwards, but everything else around them is all backwards. And the conceit that I had at the time was the whole world is out of sync with them, but only they are in sync with each other. Thus, that is the visual representation of their love. I thought it was okay at the time, but now that I don't know where that is. I don't think I have a copy of it anymore, but that was my little conceit. So I had them walking down the street, and all the traffic is going backwards, but they're walking forwards. I should have actually had more ideas employed in it, but I didn't. Now that I think about it, I should have had more things happen in the background, etc., but it didn't really happen. And then, I had them at the end, they proclaim their love for each other, and they run towards each other, and they have a little kiss in front of the school library, which is this very famous library, and then they kiss, and then they embrace, and then fade to black. It's over. And then I had a little title card that said, they got married, but then they divorced a couple of years later. And so that was something that I was trying to do again in my own time when I was in college. So I did have maybe not strong ambitions, but at least some aspirations of wanting to be a filmmaker. But going back to your question, if you were to write and direct your own feature-length film on an unlimited budget, what would it be about and who would star in it? So, gosh, I don't know. I had always wanted, because I'm a big fan of the band King Crimson and all their formations and iterations. And so I'd always wanted, way back, I always thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool to try to make a film that was in essence an adaptation or a film version of one of their most famous early songs, which is 21st Century Schizoid Man. I said, oh, wouldn't it be cool to try to adapt that song into a kind of film? And I thought, oh gosh, how could I go about that? I don't have the artistic sensibilities to even begin to fathom how one could achieve something like that. But when I was younger, I was thinking like that, and so it would be nice to maybe do that if I had an unlimited budget. And who would star in that, by the way? I think that's also a really good question. I mean, he's no longer, he's deceased, unfortunately, right now. Rest in peace, of course. But if I could, it would be someone like, I don't know, maybe Jack Nance. And then your next question is, are there any other major forms of art that resonate with you like film does? Do you have a favorite book or album that you would recommend checking out? Yes, in fact, I really love literature. And in particular, I love English literature. And I never studied it formally. Well, actually, I did take courses in it. And so I like reading, and I was actually thinking about this YouTube channel. I was thinking about doing what they call BookTube, because there's a huge BookTube community as well. It just never materialized because I can only focus so much energy and time in the day, and if I were to try to do both cinema and literature, I would just be completely just overwhelmed. And so just for purposes of YouTube, I've decided to do cinema as a focus for this channel. But I always wanted to do something with BookTube as well. I read a lot, and so I would love to do something like that. I mean, I guess I could start a video on that. Maybe I should do that for another video. But there are so many, not just literature as well, so nonfiction as well, that I'm actually I'm really taken with. And so, and then as far as albums or music goes, I think I already mentioned King Crimson. I could also mention other prog rock or other pop bands or something like that. When I was growing up, I was and I still am a huge Beatles fan. And so there's that, but that could be another video as well. And then let's see here. Another question is from Gloin dahobbit, our dear friend Gloin dahobbit, who asks, rank the last 5 Oscar Best Picture winners: Parasite, Green Book, The Shape of Water, Moonlight, and Spotlight. So I must admit that I haven't seen Green Book yet. As some of you may know, I am very bad when it comes to my recent releases, and so I haven't seen Green Book, but I've seen the other 4, and I would say that I would rank the other 4 quite highly, but if I had to pick my favorite of that 4, probably it would be Parasite, followed closely by Moonlight, and then The Shape of Water and Spotlight. But I think they all are each quite admirable in their own ways. Thank you for your question, my friend. Next is Theodore Karamanolis, and so thank you very much for your friendship and for your great question. Let's see. How and when did you decide to go on with GFT? How would you describe yours and the channel's current status? Just a cinephile that makes YouTube videos is not an option. And how have things turned for you since you first upload cinema viewing wise, meaning in the ways you view and perceive film through the new, I suppose, prism of an impromptu online diary club community cinema notebook? Also, how do you time manage what I guess that is a pretty packed daily schedule? And then you, okay. Oh, this is a really deep question. Thank you very much. And so, so I guess I could try to give you more details. I always say, and I really mean it, that this channel wouldn't exist without the support of friends and viewers. And also I say that I don't do anything special here. It's just me uploading videos on this channel. But if I were to try to sort of talk about it with a little bit more detail, I could say that maybe, how do I describe this channel's current status? I'm very proud of the channel in that there are a number of things that I was able to do on the channel in the past that I'm actually very, very proud of. I don't know if it gets a lot of views in terms of YouTube watches, but for instance, the Edward Yang series that I was able to do, I'm very, very proud of that. That's one of the things I'm most proud of, actually. I did a series where I did a video on each of the works by Edward Yang, including Confucian and Mahjong. And so I was very, very proud of that. And I don't know if there's a lot of discussion on YouTube with respect to Edward Yang or other cinema from Taiwan. And so I'm very, very proud of that. And I hope that doesn't sound like bragging, but if it does, I apologize. But really, that because the filmmaker is so important to me, and the films were also very important to me, and they still are. And so I look at that as being also, how shall I put it? I don't necessarily see those videos, or I don't necessarily see those videos as, let's say, videos that I don't think would get a lot of views. I don't think a lot of people, relatively speaking, would stop and watch the videos that I made, especially about Edward Yang. And that's not anything against them. It's just, again, my own presentation or also the subject matter, etc. It's not necessarily the thing that a lot of people would watch, but it is still something that I'm very, very proud of. And also the same is true for videos that I did on the works of Kazuo Hara. I'm very, very proud of those. And those are the videos that I think get very, very low views. And so, but I'm so proud of the videos that I did on the works of Kazuo Hara. And those are just examples, I think, of what I see this channel as. I am very flattered if people consider me to be, I don't know, like a Criterion expert or something. And I don't consider myself an expert. I just am very fortunate to have been able to collect over the course of many, many years some Laserdiscs and Blu-rays and DVDs. But that's all as far as my Criterion connections are concerned. And so I don't have a real grounded sense of expertise in that field other than as a kind of consumer. But many people have been very kind to me over the years and have referred to me as someone who is an expert in Criterion. I'm very flattered by that. But I actually see myself not necessarily as someone who is a Criterion expert, but I see myself more as just someone who is trying to work out my own cinema journey quirks and just trying to express them in a verbal form. And so a lot of this is also very therapeutic for me. And it's almost like I'm not able to fully contextualize and solidify my own thoughts unless I'm able to articulate them verbally. And so a lot of this is also kind of an exercise for me in trying to articulate verbally the stuff that I really love about a lot of these films. And so that's why I tend to go on and on and on in a video without too much editing with respect to certain films. And I know that's been a big criticism of me and this channel and then my presentation skills, and I've tried to apologize for that. But on the other hand, I have to say that I'm completely understanding of people who are not into this kind of long form video, just rambling on and on. But this channel is also for my own benefit, and part of that is just trying to express and get it all out. And then so once it's out, I'm able to then focus on that and then digest it further. I don't know if that makes sense. And so that's where I see the channel right now. And in terms of time management, I think I mentioned that in a past question. So let me just go to your next question here, which is this. What I particularly like about your presentations and is that all of your videos have a consistent vibe of nowness. Like if you are saying and shooting everything in one current go. I reckon your day job may well help with building up the speech skills, plus your evidently calm and collected way of thinking and expressing yourself. However, and despite the natural verbal feeling, you seem to have put a decent amount of preparation behind your extensive film presentations. Would you care taking us through the process behind the making of your core videos? Well, that's a really kind compliment, a number of compliments there. Thank you very much. So I should say that I know that a lot of people have also been very complimentary about the manner in which I talk, or my English, and that sort of thing. And it might have something to do with my occupation, and so I'll try to talk about that. Some other people have asked me what I do for a living, and so I'll talk about that when those questions arise. But in terms of the videos, I must say that it might seem like it's just me sitting here and I just pick an idea and I just talk about it. But in fact, and I think I can speak for a lot of other YouTubers when I say this, it's actually a lot of time. And I don't mean in terms of the post-production editing. That takes time too. But for me, it takes so much time not only to watch the film, but also to think about the film. It takes me so much time, and I can't process everything in one sitting. And so, and also I always want to get all the details right, or as right as possible. I feel so bad, and I feel like maybe I'm a bit of a perfectionist like this, but I always try to get all the details right, and that includes the way the titles are pronounced or the name of the filmmakers are pronounced. I don't get it right all the time, but a lot of time is also spent trying to get details like that correct. And as far as the substance of the film itself, when I watch a film, let's say for the John Carpenter series, I'll watch the film, but I will really try to think, what is it about this film that is engaging to me? You know, oh, it's great, it's a masterpiece. But no, let's go further. Why is it a masterpiece? Why is it great? Oh, it's great because it does this with the form. Okay, then let's go further. Why do I think doing this with the form is great? Well, doing this in the form is great because it reminds me of X, Y, and Z. Okay, then why does this reminding me of X, Y, and Z link to this film being great in my... So in other words, it's a kind of cycle that goes on and on and on. In other words, I really, how should I put it? I am not satisfied with a video that I put up that just says, oh, this film is great, and then I move on. I don't like any video that I put up that just stops there and doesn't do anything further with a discussion of that particular film, because I think the film, from my point of view, deserves as much time and attention that I can give to it. And that's not to say that, of course, whatever other people on other YouTube channels do, that's fine, and they do a great job with their presentations and their particular niche or their particular brand of YouTubing. And so this is not in any way to disparage anyone else on YouTube who does, like, let's say, capsule reviews or anything like that. But I'm talking about me, myself, here. I hate it when I make a video and it doesn't go as into the particular areas that I want it to go. And so I always try, therefore, to think ahead of time, what is it exactly I want to say here, here, and here, and here. And then I'll tend to have something stored up to be able to just say on the fly, as it were, when I press record. Now, this is also a point that I should raise. I take notes, but for the most part, there is no script. You've probably guessed this already, but there's no script. There's no computer that I look at. It's just me in this corner of the room that I'm sitting at. And it's pretty embarrassing, this particular corner, because it's just a little space here. It's not a studio. But I actually insist. I make notes occasionally when I really need to. For instance, when I was talking about A Brighter Summer Day, I really needed the notes, or other Edward Yang films, I needed the notes. Or when I'm talking about John Carpenter films and then I need notes to refer to with respect to the supplements on the Shout Factor release or something like that. So those are when I will have notes. But for the most part, it'll all be note-less. And I actually have to insist on that because, again, it's all a part of how I view these videos vis-a-vis me. I don't think of them as these prepared video essays. I think of them as sort of my in real time, in essence, working out my own issues or my own interests with the film in real time as I'm talking about it. And so I actually insist on there not being any script at all or any pre-written notes for my videos anyway. And so there's that. And so there's a lot of time spent thinking about the video and then also trying to arrange the thoughts in my head and then talking about them. And that's the most time that's spent. And then that results in just me tending to go on and on and on in a particular video, like I'm doing now, I suppose. But that's the general process that I have. So it actually takes a lot of time. And that's also the reason why there is a delay. I can't necessarily have a video a week. Every video, like this series is going to be dropped every Thursday at 4 p.m. or so. I can't do that because it is just impossible. Because as I say, depending on the nature of the film, I might need more time to spend with it and work with it, etc. So, just know that it does take a lot of time, and most of the time is spent just thinking about what it is that not necessarily what I want to say on YouTube, but more about what it is I feel about this film and why it is I feel that way. And why it is I feel that way about feeling that way about this thing. And that sort of cycle. Because I really think that is very, very important. And I think that I don't want to just say, oh, this film's great, and then not just talk about it further. Because that kind of short brevity is something that is not satisfying to me as far as what I say. And so that's the general approach that I have. And I think it's, that's the reason why I just tend to just go off like this. But I hope that answers the question. But anyway, thank you very much for the kind questions and answers. So, not answers, but kind questions and your compliments. And I hope my answers were satisfactory. Okay, so I will stop there. I didn't go very far, but I know that there are a number of other questions that have been asked. But for now, let me just stop there. And I just want to say thank you very much. And I will continue on with these Q&A videos as much as I can, and then go forward. So don't worry if I didn't answer your question yet. I'm going in order. And so thank you very much again. And thank you for all who have participated. And for anyone else who has any other questions, please feel free to leave them in that under that video at any time. And hopefully, I hope none of my responses were in any way insulting or anything like that. But if they were, you can just address that to me, and I'll be very happy to answer any concerns or issues that you might have with any particular specific comment that I might have made. So, but other than that, of course, please continue to be well, be safe, secure, and healthy, and please continue watching a lot of great movies. I will talk to you very soon and continue on with these. But until then, my friends, thank you and cheers.